What's up, guys? This is the No Games podcast with Jaden, Jesse, and myself, Bubz. How you doing, Jaden?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. You said I like the way that you say my name in your accent. It's very
Oh,
nice.
how do I say it? How do I say it that's different to yours? And
Uh,
do not make me do an Aussie accent.
so for me, I'd say Jaden Jesse, and
Jaden.
Jaden, and and for you, you say Jaden Jesse. I think
Okay.
kinda.
Right.
I don't know.
Uncanny, my guy. Uncanny. It's like I'm looking in a mirror.
Look, it's whatever you think it is. All right.
Oh God. Okay,
Not
let's
good.
stop there.
Yeah, stop.
Let's not
Stop.
carry that on.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you. All right.
You know what? Okay, but no, that's funny. So before we get into the topic, that kind of leads me into an anecdote. So
Yep.
I lived in France for about, how long was I there? I lived in France for about 4 months while
Yep.
I was in university because I had to do 2 foreign placements in my third year of university, right? So one of them was in France, the other was in Germany. Well, when I was in France, I was out drinking one night with some friends, and there was a guy that joined us who was a friend of a friend, and he was Belgian.
Yeah.
He spoke perfect English, right? His English was great, but because he was Belgian and I was a few drinks down, I thought it would be really funny to initially pretend that I was from Australia and see if you could tell the difference. So for a solid half an hour there, before I just gave up, I tried to convince this guy that I was, where did I say I was from? Sydney. I was like, oh, that's the first Aussie place that came to mind. I was like, Sydney, I'll do Sydney. Thankfully, I cannot remember what I said or how I said it. I don't want to remember it. I don't want to even try to contemplate how cringy that was or how many times I missed the mark. But that guy, the point is, it was successful. He believed me, and then I was like, I'm just fucking with you. I can't do this any longer. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I love doing accents. Aussie accent is one of my favorite ones to do, but I'm not going to attempt it today. Maybe once I've had a couple of drinks. But,
Okay. Well, then maybe one day we need to think about switching the times and do it at a time when you can, get a little sloshed.
I mean, I could get a little sloshed right now. It's 11 a.m., but I feel like that definitely meets criteria for having a problem.
Yeah.
It's like I'm
It's
not going to be
5
that.
p.m. somewhere.
I was just about to say I'm not going to be one of those. It's 5 p.m. somewhere, got people. But yeah, but I gotta ask you. So going back to the Aussie accent thing,
Yep.
it always, like, I always find it really interesting how in a lot of places, America's one of them, the UK as well. For the UK, despite it being such a small country, has such a variety of accents and dialects, right? And even you can travel 50 miles, and like come across a completely different accent, right? Each time.
Yep.
And to the best of my knowledge, and I might be wrong because I don't live in Australia, but I don't think I am wrong because I've asked a couple of Australians about this and they've agreed with me. It doesn't seem to me like Australia is a country that has that much variation in their accents. Like they do have different levels of like formality. So you have like standard Australian, and then you have like sort of bogan and more, and it makes the accent thicker, right? It makes you sound.
That's a derogatory term. All right.
Is it actually?
No, it's fine.
Okay. You have me worried there for a second. I was like, if it's a derogatory term, then it's one of the most commonly used derogatory terms I've ever heard.
Bubz is cancelled, guys. I'm sorry. All right, podcast over.
That didn't take long. That was 5 minutes into episode 2.
Hey, remember it happened,
yeah,
but it happened in the practice as well. All right.
Oh yeah, it's true. So what was I saying? Yeah, so like I've heard that you have different levels of register, and the Australian accent gets thicker or more watered down the more formal the register, right? Which is true across with other countries and other dialectal variations, but the accent in and of itself largely remains the same. So can you speak to that a little bit? Does someone from Perth, if you had someone from Perth, which is Western Australia, I believe?
Yeah.
Right? And someone from, say, New South Wales in the same room together, and they were of the same, like, socioeconomic class, like broadly speaking, could you really not tell the difference? Like, could you not place them on a map based on their accent?
I mean, in some ways, no. But okay, so one thing that I have found with like specifically with New South Wales, there seems to be more of a Lebanese community,
Okay.
and so you know, quite a lot of times you'll like people who have gone to school or gone to work or whatever, they would have worked with somebody who may have kind of a kind of more Lebanese kind of accent. So sometimes there is that kind of thing where like somebody from New South Wales might speak with a bit more of what I would kind of class as somewhat of a little bit of a Lebanese twinge to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Which I'm not going to do because I don't want to come across as as making fun of it, because I'm definitely not. Like that's fine, but it's like but I have noticed that especially like because I have cousins that live in Sydney and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have noticed that my cousins do have kind of more of a more of that sort of quality to the way that they talk, and it's almost kind of like an accent, but I don't know. It kind of, over there it more gets just classed as like a bogan accent almost, to be honest.
So is that kind of that sort of Lebanese influence or foreign influence into the accent? There's a word that I came across a while ago that's, as far as I'm aware, still fairly widely casually used in Australia. I'm not going to repeat it because it has also been used in the UK historically, but it had like explicitly racist connotations to it.
Yeah.
But it's a 3-letter word that begins with W to describe someone
Yes.
who, right. So is that what you would call that kind of accent? Is it's a W accent, like a what that word followed by, like, is that, or is that a different thing?
I definitely wouldn't call it that, because so basically even here that's been kind of used as a derogatory term to kind of describe anybody that's kind of kind of European / Middle Eastern, so like Italian and Albanian and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, well that's the thing. It's kind of seen as a bit of a derogatory term, but then also there is like there's movies that are named like Super, that W word,
Yeah,
and
I heard about that. Yep.
like there's stuff like that that's also used. So I don't know. It's kind of a grey area, to be honest. I mean,
Okay.
it's in some in some contexts it's seen as a bad thing. In some, it's like, well, okay, but kind of, I don't know. I don't know if they would describe, if anybody who is of like an Italian or whatever culture, European culture, would explain it like this, but kind of like how in some ways how the African American community have kind of reclaimed the N word as well.
Hmm.
It kind of seems like maybe they've kind of reclaimed it as well, so it's kind of, it's their thing and not so much used against them.
So,
Which,
do you foresee the word becoming more stigmatized in Australia? Or
yes,
okay,
yes,
gotcha.
absolutely.
What's in? I'm sorry.
No, you go.
You're saying what's interesting is that it was about, not even that long ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. I was asking my friend from who's in Melbourne.
Yeah,
I was asking him about it, and I was asking him if it was seen like really as a slur or as derogatory as it has been in the UK. I don't know about the US. I don't think it was ever commonly used in the US. I think it was a British slur more than anything else. But
yeah.
and again, this wasn't that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I was saying to him, is it seen? Does it have that same stigma attached to it? And he said, no, not really. It's pretty broadly used. Uh, so yeah, it's interesting but not surprising necessarily that that stigma is becoming increasingly attached to it as time
Yeah.
goes on.
Well, that's the thing. I think also it depends on like it kind of speaks to the point that I was saying before about how there's quite a large kind of Lebanese and kind of European community in like the eastern states.
Yeah.
In WA, not so much. So I guess it's maybe not as commonly used here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. For me, I always understood it as being not a great term. More by my mum has told me that because she's got like Italian and Albanian background and all that kind of stuff, and she's always kind of never really liked that word. But that could be a personal thing as well. But I think increasingly, yeah, it's becoming more stigmatized for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah. And to your point about language being used or claimed by a certain group to, and this kind of is going to lead on to what I wanted to talk about for the podcast.
Cool.
It kind of highlights the political and social, cultural power that language can have in its use, because people say that going on to, I'm not going to make this about free speech entirely, but to broadly kind of divert a little bit, people, there's this kind of debate that's still raging nowadays about sort of how harmful or how effective can words be used as a form of violence as opposed to physical violence. And there's a debate, and I think it should be had about the extent and the limits of free speech, and how the limits of free speech play into how language can be used and for what purposes it can be used. And there are some people that believe that it's incorrect and foolish and dangerous to classify language necessarily as violence, and I would probably put myself in that category of people, broadly speaking. But it's also worth noting that it does have political usages and political power, and to argue that language cannot be used as a tool for in the social, cultural, and political spaces is just foolish to argue otherwise, right? Because I mean, how does any politician really persuade any voter base? It's through language, right? Language in and of itself is a tool, and it can be used for all kinds of purposes. So to hear you saying that it's kind of, in some circles, it's kind of in areas of society that word has started to be claimed by the groups that it refers to in an attempt to kind of bolster their cultural and social power and their standing, is very interesting, much in the same way that the N-word, like you say, has been claimed by the African American community as a countermeasure to its historical use for discrimination.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But that kind of leads me on to the topic for today's podcast, which is really kind of language, more specifically. So my background is in foreign languages. I studied French and German at university.
Yep.
So I have a very big interest in languages in general. I think I would say I have a brain for learning languages. I would say that's what my brain is most geared towards. Everybody has a brain for something. For me, that was never maths or science or any of the hard STEM subjects. That's never something I excelled in. I feel like if I'd put enough work into it, I could have done okay, but it just wasn't something that I ever felt worthwhile to put that much effort into, that much blood and sweat into. Yeah. So I have a brain for languages, and right now I'm focusing particularly on German and really trying to improve my proficiency in German. So I wanted to talk about a movie. I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this have seen it, or at least heard of it. Inglourious Basterds.
Okay.
Yeah, have you seen it? The Tarantino movie?
I've seen parts of it.
Seen parts of it? Okay.
Yeah.
So I love that movie, both because I think it's a great movie. It's an entertaining movie, and I think that it's a really interesting and fun play on like alternative history. So if you're not aware of it, the basic premise is that there's a group of cutthroat cutthroat Jewish soldiers who are assigned to assassinate Hitler, and they succeed in doing so. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like an alternative. What if this had happened in the war? But there are plenty of smatterings of German and French throughout the movie because it's set in Nazi-occupied France. A lot of it is set in those areas. So really, the main languages that are used are English, French, and German. And there's a particular scene in the movie that is set in a bar that's about 15 to 20 minutes long in length. And it's it's not cut, it's like one continuous cut. Right, so that's how long the scene is, and it's used to really build tension. That's the main purpose of the scene. And in it, Michael Fassbender plays a British spy who is fluent in German, and as such is used by the British Army to go to France, rendezvous with a German spy who is working with the Allies, and he has to go undercover as a Nazi officer, and his job is to go there, get information from their German spy about the when and where of Hitler and when he's going to be in this particular place at this particular time so they can carry out the assassination. So he goes there. It's supposed to be a quick 5 minutes in and out. He gets the information. They leave. He ends up, there's a bunch of other German soldiers there who are out there celebrating. And long story short, they end up getting caught up in... They end up being bothered by this German soldier who's very drunk, but he's trying to strike up a conversation. Michael Fassbender takes it upon himself to, order this German soldier to leave. He doesn't explicitly say because we're trying to figure out how to assassinate Hitler, because he'd be a very bad spy otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so he starts speaking, and then instantly, even this German soldier who's like two sheets to the wind. Is that the expression?
I don't know. I haven't heard that expression.
Okay. He's like 10 beers deep, right? He's slurring his words. But even as someone whose cognitive abilities by this point are greatly impaired by how drunk he is, instantly the first words out of this soldier's mouth to this British spy are, in German, of course. He says, "Excuse me, sir, but your accent is very peculiar. Where are you from?" Right? And this is Michael Fassbender's character is speaking flawless German, like absolutely perfect. Like from a grammatical standpoint, you can't flaw him.
Yeah.
But what I find really interesting is how insanely difficult it is, how incredibly clever you would have to be to pass as a native speaker to a non-native speaker, right? And it kind of highlights just how many things go and make up language as it's known. It's not just about the formal hard and fast rules of a language, right? You can speak perfect German, and a German speaker will recognize that you are speaking their language very proficiently. But the language in and of itself is not the only thing that comes into play. There are so many social, cultural factors that come into play, like accent, dialectal variation, things, kinds of like pronunciation, like pitch and fall, right? There are certain accents where people and certain languages where intonation is done in a certain way that just isn't done in other languages. So for example, as a German speaker myself and someone who's a native English speaker, there are other parts of that scene where Michael Fassbender speaks German that is perfect, but he'll rise his voice and he'll drop his voice in a way that just isn't done amongst German speakers, but is done amongst English speakers. Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm able to look at that and think, you're really giving yourself away here, kid, And so it's very interesting for me as someone who is a native English speaker and has a background with German to notice the differences that it doesn't matter, no matter how pitch perfect his German itself is as a language, grammatically, there's just things that would give him away.
Yeah.
That, again, you would have to be incredibly well versed, not just in the structure of the language, but also the cultural elements of how people speak that language to bridge that divide and to try and to stand any chance of blending in as a native speaker. There's so much that goes into it. Now, of course, through all this, that's translated by Tarantino very easily to the in a very surface level way to the audience. He lets us know that Michael Fassbender is giving himself away because the soldiers question his accent, because he visually raises eyebrows amongst the German speakers, right? And so that makes it very accessible to the audience. But if you have a background in both those languages, you can tell, even if it wasn't that obvious, you can tell that he's doing things that are blowing his cover. And so I found pretty niche, I know, but I found that really, really fascinating and really interesting and fun to watch. And I've actually been going back and watching that scene over and over again over the last couple of weeks and really listening to the fine details and seeing like, okay, is there anything else there that could have been picked up on? Or is there anything else he could have done differently that might have, if he just known that, culturally speaking, maybe things wouldn't have ended up going so badly for him? Because the result of the scene is that it's not even the language that blows his cover, it's that he signals to the bartender to get them 3 drinks, and he does this. Right?
Yeah.
If you were signaling the number 3, you would do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As would I, naturally. So the Germans always count with their thumb first. Always. You will never come across a German who does it like that. They would always do it like that. So that's a cultural thing, not necessarily a linguistic thing, but that is the nail in his coffin. And as soon as he does that, the Germans realize that he's not German, and it results in a firefight, and he gets killed. So yeah, really, really fascinating for me. Anyway, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Yeah, exactly. They did their homework for sure. They did their homework. So that's kind of the topic that I wanted to talk about today, is just how complex language is and how much subtle variation there is between different pockets and different segments of speakers of a language, and how there's always going to be different influences that influence if you imagine speaking a language as like as a picture or as a puzzle that's been completed, there's so many different things that influence where the pieces go and how it's pieced together. And there are certain variations and certain different pieces of the puzzle that might differ from one speaker of the language to another, that are more acceptable amongst speakers than others. So, for example, someone who is from one part of Germany that has a specific accent speaking to someone from another part of Germany that has a specific accent, yes, they'll notice that someone from one part of Germany might use a different word to describe something. But at the end of the day, there are enough of the pieces of the puzzle overlap between the two speakers for them to know that at the end of the day, they're both native German speakers. Whereas the piece of the puzzle that Michael Fassbender's character uses, i.e. doing that instead of that, that's blaringly obvious that does not belong in the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So, gives it away.
Yeah. So. Yeah, well, that's the thing. I've always found, like, at school, I studied Italian.
Okay.
Because it was, well, it wasn't compulsory in high school, but in primary school, or like, I guess in the US, if there's anybody listening from the US, it'd be elementary school. Then Italian was compulsory, and that was one of the classes that we had to take. But it wasn't until kind of later in life that I realized how many similarities there are between Italian and Spanish.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, of course, I mean, both of them, the kind of base, and of course, even for parts of English as well, the base of it is Latin.
Right.
But there's a lot of things sometimes, like because I don't know either Italian or Spanish all that well, sometimes it'll take me a few seconds to really listen to what somebody's saying in any of those particular languages, and it'll take me a second to realize which one they're actually speaking. And for me, more like it's more like the rolling of the R's in Italian, more so than Spanish, that kind of gives it away for me. And the more use of things like, say, Z or Z kind of sounds. But yeah, I mean, and like I've had to kind of somewhat learn a bit of Hindi as well, because my dad is actually, he's Indian. He was born in Fiji, but he speaks Hindi to his whole family.
Okay.
And I mean, even my grandmother, his mother, who she lives in Sydney, but she doesn't speak English really at all. I mean, she's lived here since, like, I don't know, 99 or something. But yeah, she only speaks Hindi, so I've had to kind of learn little bits and pieces over the years, more just kind of greetings, and then a couple of swear words that my cousins taught me while I was in Fiji. But
yeah, it's always the swear words. That's always people's go-to whenever they learn a new language.
Oh yeah, and the worst thing is that, so when I learned this, like, it was when I went to Fiji for the first time, I was like, I think 8 or something. I didn't know not to snitch to anybody. So I basically, you know, being excited that I learnt something in Hindi, I went to my mum and I'm just like, oh yeah, like my cousin taught me these words and whatever, and this is what they mean, and and then she's like, oh, you should tell your grandmother that.
Oh no.
I was 8 years old. I didn't know any better. Okay.
Oh man.
My cousin got in so much trouble. I am so sorry. Okay, I didn't know any better.
It's like if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, my guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I should say Avian. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh man. I can picture you two on the, you know how you on your reaction channel, you what's that TV show that you react to sometimes? Is it Maury?
Yeah.
Maury, or yeah? I can picture you two on Maury be like, so and you guys you coming onto stage just hashing it out in front of a live audience.
You snitched on me. I didn't.
You snitched on me when I was. Just ends up with you two like rolling around on the stage, like, you know, in cartoons when they get into fights, they always draw it as a cloud with like fists flying out of it.
Yeah, that hooks up to a lie detector test. You lied about this, and also there's a baby also, and who's the father?
The lie detector test shows that Jaden, you are the snitch.
Oh, you are the 6'9".
Yeah, oh god. Oh, it's Takashi. Anyway.
Oh god.
But going, kind of touching back on what you were saying about Spanish and Italian and how you use those little details to kind of help you distinguish between the two. That's kind of how I learned to distinguish between Kiwi and Aussie accents, right?
Yep.
I'm at a point now where I can. Sometimes it takes a few seconds for me to be able to if I know that someone is from either of those two countries. It might take me a few seconds to figure it out, but I'm always on the listen for two particular vowel sounds.
Yeah.
One particular vowel sound, and it's how they say e's and i's, right? Because a Kiwi will an Aussie will say, I don't want to use the Deck commercial as an example. You know the Deck commercial?
Yep.
Yeah. But in Aussie, you say e's more like a flat e sound, like an eh sound. Whereas someone from New Zealand would say it like more like an I, right? And conversely, for an I sound, you would say it like an I, and someone from New Zealand would say it like an
Yeah.
So like you would say pick, and someone from New Zealand would say pick.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that pisses me off so much with like, particularly it seems to be American actors that try to do Australian accents.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
ask an American accent to do any accent that's not their own, and there's always a very high probability of it going down the drain. But
well, yeah, I mean, because so recently, like, brilliant movie, but I rewatched Tropic Thunder recently.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, Robert Downey Jr., of course, for most of the movie, plays an African American man. Which,
yeah, I don't know if that would fly in today's climate.
Absolutely not. People are trying to cancel him as we speak. But, but that part's neither here nor there. The part that I'm annoyed about is, so they had of course, at the end, because like the whole time along, he's supposed to be an Australian actor who's playing this African American role. And
Okay.
then when he removes the African American makeup from his face, then starts speaking in the Australian accent, and it's very New Zealander.
Okay.
And the whole movie is great, but just that is like the only thing that really annoys me. Like it sends shivers down my spine just because I'm just like, okay, like, especially because so actors like that, especially someone of his fame and his stature. I don't really know what position he was in like, I think it was, what was it, '08 or something that movie came out. Um, but I'm not 100% sure at that stage because I know he had some personal issues, whatever, like towards the kind of start-ish of his career. But
Hmm.
I would think that he would have enough money, or even the movie would have enough of a budget to hire a like accent coach for him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. Dialect coaches, accent coaches, language coaches, they never seem to invest enough time and money into those things for sure. It's one of the, yeah. And it again, I'm with you. It really annoys me. It really frustrates me. It's like, have you ever watched The Boys?
I have watched like the first couple episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Carl Urban,
Mhm.
great actor. Fucking hell, I don't know what he's trying to do in that fucking, like, he's a New Zealander who's supposed to be playing a Cockney, right?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yep.
Now, you'd think that there's not a huge amount of a bridge to gap between those two accents. There's some, but it's not big enough for him to not to get away with not kind of nailing it. And I gotta say, for the whole thing, it's just so hit and miss. I'm trying to remember how I described it to my friend. He sounds like he's doing a parody of himself almost.
Yep.
Instead of a New Zealander trying to do a Cockney accent, he sounds he comes across like a Cockney who's trying to deliberately do a really bad New Zealand accent. That's how twisted he gets it, and it's so weird to listen to.
Yep.
So yeah, it pisses me off. And there's plenty more examples I could list, but I mean, yeah, examples of if they just spent a little bit more time and effort and money on with an accent coach or a language coach, if they're playing a bilingual part, then yeah, there's no shortage of examples in Hollywood of them really skimping on that, and it's such a shame.
Well, yeah,
Um,
because I
so
mean, recently I watched. I don't know if you've seen there's a new Netflix movie that's out. They cloned Tyrone.
no, I haven't even heard of that actually.
Okay, so it's got Jamie Foxx in it, but
Okay,
then also so like the main character is played by John Boyega,
oh, okay, gotcha.
who of course is British, but
Hmm.
he plays a just straight up hood African American guy, and his seriously, like, I didn't get taken out of the movie at all whatsoever. Like his accent was absolutely perfect. The way he spoke, you believed it. And the
Yeah,
craziest thing about it was literally like 2 days ago, I saw that he did. Sorry, 2 days before I watched the movie, I saw the what is it? So Rhett and Link's offshoot channel, the Mythical Kitchen.
yeah,
They did their last meal series, and they had John Boyega on it. And of course, you hear throughout that whole thing, he's got the usual like British accent with like a bit of kind of, I don't know, with kind of like the British ism slang kind of thing.
hmm
But the fact that watching that movie and just hearing how flawless his accent was, and especially with like acting alongside someone like Jamie Foxx as well, who was playing a pimp as well, which is funny. But
doesn't
um,
surprise me.
yeah, exactly. uh, Hilarious movie. But the fact that you didn't pick any sort of difference between them, at
Yeah,
least
between the
I
two.
didn't. like it tells me that he definitely worked on it, and I don't know whether he got a like dialect coach or whatever, or if it's just he just worked on it. Like, and that's the thing. Like, even actors could do that too. Like, if they really worked on it and really studied, like they would for pretty much like any other role. Like how they want to understand what is this person's motivation, why are they, say, retaliating this way, why are they acting this way, why are they so emotional in this situation, kind of thing. Like, I feel like it'd be along the same lines, but it's just, it is harder, I guess, but it's just, I don't know. It's all about getting into the mindset of the character, I guess. But
Yeah, that definitely helps. Going back to the boys, actually, something occurred to me while you were talking. I gave an example of a pretty slapdash accent job in that show, but a counter example is Anthony Starr, who's also a Kiwi, and his obviously he plays Homelander, so he's obviously plays an American.
Yeah.
And I had no fucking idea until I was halfway through the show that he was a New Zealander. Had no clue. He does that. He just absolutely nails it time and time again so perfectly, that American accent. And it is a generic American accent. There's nothing specific about it.
Yeah.
But for the purpose, but like you were saying about John Boyega and sort of how he did that so well that you were able to be fully immersed in the show and not even think about the fact that this was someone portraying a hood African American. It's the same thing with Anthony Starr's performance in Homelander. Is you're just completely engulfed in the show itself and the character and his acting. You don't even think about his accent because he just makes it sound so natural.
Yeah.
So, and that's the ultimate goal, really, I think.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's a guy on YouTube called Eric Singer. He's a linguist, and he's actually an accent and language and dialect coach by profession mainly.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of videos for Wired where he sits down and he reacts to, how Wired do a lot of people reacting to people from a certain profession sit down and they watch different movies or TV shows that involve those professions and they rate it in terms of like realism.
Yeah.
So he does a very similar thing where he reacts to different actors' attempts at doing accents in Hollywood and on TV shows, and he kind of rates how good of a job they do. And he really breaks down. He goes into the nitty gritty about it and say, so the accent they're trying to do very often has these particular linguistic features, and this actor really nails that, or sometimes this actor neglects to do that. And it's so some of the funniest ones is when he reviews Michael Caine trying to do different accents, because there was a movie, I can't remember the name of the movie. Michael Caine, again, I think he's a great actor.
Yeah.
But for the love of him, he cannot do anything other than his own accent. He just can't. And there's one movie that Eric Singer reacts to where he's supposed to be portraying a Texan, and he listens to it for 5 seconds and he turns to the camera and he's like, this is just Michael Caine wearing a cowboy hat. Like, that's all this is. Like, there's no difference whatsoever between his like, he doesn't even try. So
the funny thing about that is that, so I've seen a few interviews of different people, and also Michael Caine himself, I believe, saying how much he dislikes people doing impressions of him.
Oh, really?
Because he believes that when people do an impression of him, they just go way too hard into the kind of Cockney accent. Go, Michael Caine. Hello, I'm Michael Caine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just like, well, okay. Do you not see the irony in that though? Like,
exactly, my dude. Oh my god. Yeah. It really slaps you in the face.
Oh my god.
But yeah. But yeah, I think that I could spend all day listing examples of people whose performances I really commend when it comes to the effort that they put into learning another language or an accent for a role, and then there's plenty of examples. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think there's more examples in the latter camp of people who did just, for one reason or another, weren't worked with enough during production.
Yeah.
To nail it. So
I mean, and there's also like something to be said as well for voice actors as well in like cartoons and all that. Like well, I don't know if it's a great example, but an example is Hank Azaria from The Simpsons.
yeah,
Who does many voices, many different accents and things like that, and then because of kind of cancel culture, he had to retire the Apu character because it was deemed as offensive. Which I don't know, in the context of the show, yes, I do think in some ways it is offensive. The fact that yes, he's an Indian man who also happens to own a convenience store, like that's very much kind of racial stereotypes.
mm-hmm.
But I feel like retiring the character altogether maybe wasn't the way to go about it.
So here's my thoughts on that. First of all, it seems to me
that all we
very
see
often
is sorry, I started thinking of the Family Guy theme song.
Oh. Anyway. Oh my god. What was I saying? Yeah, it seems to me that when it comes to outrage about, and I'm not talking about actual persecution or actual discrimination. I'm talking about like comedy, right?
Yeah.
Seems to me that a lot of the outrage that's manufactured about racial stereotyping or whatever, a lot of it comes from people who are not of that race. A lot of the time, it's white people feeling like they have to get offended on behalf of in this case Indian people, right?
Yes.
Nobody kicked up a fuss, Indian or otherwise, about the character of Apu for like 25 years, and then all of a sudden it gets blown out the water. Now, that's the first point I want to make about that. The second point I want to make about that is people are acting like every single character in The Simpsons isn't a stereotype in some form or another. It fucking is, right?
Yes.
Look at Luigi. The only Italian character in the show is called Luigi, has a black twirly mustache, and owns a pizzeria. The only Scottish person in the show is a ginger and wears a kilt.
Yep.
And is an aggressive drunk. The only Irish person in the show says nothing but top of the morning to you, right? Everyone of every kind of ethnic background or nationality is heavily stereotyped for the purposes of comedy to some degree or another.
Yep.
And I just find it really interesting that like one particular person's stereotype is seen as more offensive than another's.
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, because
like, I'm sorry, just to add to that, and even if it's not like a national or ethnic stereotype, sometimes it's a career stereotype. So a lot of the chief of police is seen as a fat, incompetent, donut-eating pig. Like everything is a stereotype in that show. That's the point. That's the comedic value of it. Like it's exaggerative. So
exactly, because not only that, like, so part of the point of that is yes, okay, sometimes that is the butt of the joke, but then also there are episodes where they shine a light on those characters and show you that they are also more than that.
Like, they're multifaceted. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like specifically, like, I mean, Chief Wiggum, I mean, he is a fat, incompetent police officer, but at the same time, he is also a family man, and he is also working hard to, in the best way that he can, but he is also like working to put food on his family's table. I mean, that's also the commendable side of it. And I mean, same thing with Apu even. I mean, he's running a convenience store, yes, but he is doing so and working so many hours as they have shown before.
Yep.
Exactly, because he has freaking 9 kids or something.
Yeah, I think they have octuplets. Yeah.
Yeah. tuplets, and then his wife's got to stay at home and look after the babies. I mean, so again, it's like there's more to the character than just that surface level stuff that people are getting offended over.
Yeah, no,
on
absolutely.
behalf of other people, like
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I think people often forget this. Sometimes the purpose of comedy is what people perceive as the butt of the joke is actually or rather, what I'm trying to say is the caricature that's being portrayed is not the butt of the joke.
Yep.
It sometimes, and if you do it cleverly, this is the case. The butt of the joke is actually the kinds of people that would look at a character like Apu and only see the fact that he's Indian, that would only see the stereotypes. So, for example, I think you can make an argument that if you're stereotyping an Indian man like that, you're not. The creators of The Simpsons are not literally saying, haha, this is what all Indians are like. But actually, what they're trying to say is some people are so shallow and dumb that this is what they perceive someone like Apu to be like. That some people actually would look at Apu and that's all they would see is an Indian man running a corner store, right? Yeah. Whereas, as you say, when you get down into the nitty gritty of it, that there's so much more to his character and his that there are traits and there are complexities to him as a person that go way beyond just the color of his skin and the stereotype that he's portrayed as.
Yep.
And some of the most stereotyped people in that show do have at least one episode about them that really delves into their complexities. Groundskeeper Willie is another one. Yep. We learn a lot about Groundskeeper Willie as a person in several episodes than just the fact that he's an angry Scottish drunkard, right?
Yep.
So,
I mean, the one that not specifically, obviously, showing what he's like, but the one episode that stands out to me is a Treehouse of Horror episode. Actually,
love it.
It was one where they basically parodied The Shining.
Shining, yeah. Yep. And he's the he's the groundskeeper there.
Yeah, exactly. You've got the shinin. Oh, you mean shining? Do you want to get sued?
You want to get sued? Yeah, I love that.
Oh, I love it. But I don't know. Whenever I think of Groundskeeper Willie, that's like one of the first episodes I think of. But I guess that kind of speaks to the fact that I don't really think of the fact that he's specifically a Scottish man or whatever, that he is all these kind of Scottish stereotypes and whatever. Like, I just think of him as another character who's just funny, and that's the point of the show. It's just like it's all these characters who seem like, okay, maybe they shouldn't kind of fit into these quirky situations that usually the main characters are getting into, but somehow they weave into it, and somehow they are like they fit in perfectly because despite any sort of differences that they may have.
Do you think that on some level that at least maybe in the earliest days of the show that's kind of an attempt for the producers to embody the American dream, so to speak? Is it's kind of a very simplified, picture perfect idea of people from all kinds of nationalities, backgrounds, and skill sets and stereotypes or whatever coming to the same town and coexisting and successfully making a way for themselves in this sort of American small town?
Absolutely, I think for sure. I mean, there's too much pointing to that fact for it not to be. I mean, the fact that there's so many characters of different backgrounds and all that is just obvious. They could have easily just made a show where it was like, okay, all the people, they look the same, all they all live in this town, and they're all the same, but they went out of their way to make sure that there was some sort of representation for different ethnicities, for different cultures. And I really feel like, because I mean, even there's like, I completely forgot about this for a second, but I just realized. So there was the episode where when Apu was getting married to Manjula, I believe that's her name.
Yeah. Yeah, Manjula.
They the way that they did that episode, like, yeah, of course there was the comedic moments and whatever, but the way they did that episode, the way they portrayed this beautiful Indian wedding and everything like that, like, it was done very well, I think.
Yeah, it's almost the opposite of a stereotypical reduction, or sorry, the reduction of something to a stereotype, which kind of trivializes it. It's almost the opposite of that, right? It's almost like they were paying homage to that aspect of Indian culture.
Exactly, like, because they could have made a joke like, oh well, like, it would have been kind of a visual joke, but it would have been like, okay, well, oh, they're so, like, one of the family members is cooking some curry over here for the wedding, and it explodes or something, like, and that's supposed to be the butt of the joke. But you know, the biggest, I think, joke in that was basically that the elephants got scared. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, okay, there's elephants, you know, and there was, I think it was a mouse that scared them. Yeah. So it's just like, that's just like a common
so
thing.
The butt of the joke ultimately is not the cultural aspect. It's the fact they went down an entirely different route. They portrayed one of the most beautiful aspects of Indian culture there, and the joke that they moved in was that they worked their way into that was, haha, look at this giant animal getting scared of a mouse.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And as someone who's been to multiple Indian weddings, I will tell you, so yeah, it definitely looks very beautiful, but it can be very tiring because a lot of the time it lasts like 3 days. So
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that it's not like a 1-day thing. It's kind of it's like it's carried out across multiple days. Why is that? Is it like is each day dedicated to like a different part of the ceremony, or how does that work?
I don't actually know. I think it's more as a reason for everybody to already kind of be there in one place, and then if they need any help to set up anything, they have people there that they can ask.
Oh, okay, so it's like they have a support net.
Yes, but then other than that, like, pretty much everybody's just kind of sitting around and everybody's just playing music. Somebody's playing a dolok drum, somebody's playing the harmonium, you know, like, there's always just loud music, somebody singing, whether they can or not, somebody singing.
Yeah, someone's going for it.
Exactly. And honestly, I admire the confidence, but over 3 days, it gets a little bit too much.
Starts to wear you down. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it's not too bad. I mean, it's just, it ends up being tiring because everybody wants to just keep partying up until late at night, and then they're just like, oh yeah, by the way, we've also got to wake up early for the wedding tomorrow, and it's like, wait, what? But this it's 11 o'clock, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to end on.
Yes, I agree.
What a great note. So yeah, no, listen, man, it's been great. I appreciate your thoughts. I know that this topic was a little bit of quite a big deviation from the last episode, but you know, it's something that I was passionate about, and it's actually something that I was talking to my friend last night in some good depth. So yeah, I appreciate your time.
Of course, man. That's exactly what this podcast is about, man. We're not trying to kind of stick to any specific topic or anything. It can be anything that we bring to the table, and it's just like, because we're gonna have different we're probably gonna have differing opinions at some point, hopefully hopefully not in a negative way, but no,
I mean, let's consider it an outlet for the practice of civil discourse. I think is lacking.
But we play no games with that. We play no games.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, that was it for this week's podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. There will be some links in the description, and probably Jaden, if I'm not mistaken, there should be something coming up on the screen right about now.
Yep.
You want to do your little post production magic?
It's over here.
But
No,
yeah.
it's over here. It's down there. Okay. Yep.
It'll be somewhere. But yeah, thanks, guys. Until next time, peace.